Welcome to English with Zenko Master. Get ready to learn something new today.
I was already complaining before the day had really started. My name is Evelyn, and on that cold Monday morning, I stood at the bus stop with my coat half zipped and a phone pressed to my ear. My fingers were freezing, and my stomach was empty. I had a small bag of almonds in my pocket, but I didn't feel like eating. What I felt like doing was going back home and canceling the appointment. It was my first time seeing a nutritionist, and I didn't want to go. I didn't believe it would help. My doctor had suggested it after my last checkup. He said maybe I was low on energy because of my eating habits. I said I was just busy, but he gave me the card anyway. So here I was, talking to my best friend Lila at 8 in the morning, already feeling annoyed. "I don't even know what he's going to tell me," I said. "Eat more spinach? Drink herbal tea? Honestly, I could give myself the same advice." I didn't notice the man sitting quietly on the bench until I turned around to find a place to sit. He wore a dark coat and held a book, but he wasn't reading. He was just sitting, listening, or at least that's how it looked. I lowered my voice, but only a little. "They always act like food is magic," I said. "Like if you just eat the right thing, everything in your life will be perfect." "No thanks." Lila tried to calm me down, but I wasn't in the mood. "I'm tired, I'm cold, and I'm already hungry. And now I have to pay someone to tell me I'm doing everything wrong." The man didn't say a word. He just closed his book gently. That made me pause, but I kept talking anyway. "They'll probably hand me a list of fancy things to buy and call it a plan. I'll nod, smile, and walk out exactly the same." Then the bus came. I said goodbye to Lila, climbed aboard, and sat near the back. The man from the bench sat across from me, and I stared out the window, trying not to think about what I had just said. I hoped he hadn't really been listening, but a small part of me already knew he had. The ride to the wellness center was short. I arrived 10 minutes early and stood at the front desk to check in. The receptionist smiled and asked me to wait in the small lobby. The place smelled like mint and paper, and soft music played from a speaker above the chairs. I sat down and looked at the wall. There were posters about healthy eating, balanced meals, and how to stay hydrated. One of them said, "You are what you eat," and I shook my head quietly. A door opened on the far side of the room. A woman stepped out first, holding a paper in her hand. Then a man followed her. He wore simple clothes and dark shoes. My heart dropped. It was the man from the bus stop. He smiled at the woman, nodded to the receptionist, and then walked back through the door. I felt my face grow warm. My first thought was to leave. My second thought was that I had probably just insulted the person I was about to meet. The receptionist called my name. "Evelyn? You can go in now." I stood slowly, feeling like I was walking into a test I hadn't studied for. The hallway was quiet, and the door at the end had a name on it. I didn't read it. I knocked gently, and a voice said, "Come in." I opened the door, and there he was again. He looked up from a folder and smiled, calm and kind. "Hello," he said. You must be Evelyn. I'm Thomas. I stood still for a moment, then nodded. Yes, I said. Nice to meet you. I sat down in the chair across from his desk and tried not to look nervous. Thomas didn't mention the bus stop. He opened the folder and asked about my health, my daily meals, and how I usually felt in the mornings. I answered everything, but my mind kept going back to what I had said earlier. I couldn't remember all the details, but I knew it hadn't been kind. He asked about my sleep, my stress, and how often I skipped meals. I told him the truth. I usually didn't eat breakfast. I drank too much coffee. I often worked late and snacked instead of cooking. He nodded and wrote a few things down. You're not alone, he said. A lot of people feel this way. The goal isn't perfection. It's small changes that make you feel better. His voice was soft, not sharp like I had imagined. I had expected someone strict, someone who would look at me like I was doing everything wrong. But he didn't. He just listened. I started to relax. Then he smiled again and said, And don't worry. I won't tell you to give up coffee completely. I looked up quickly. Was that a joke? Was he letting me know that he had heard what I said earlier? I laughed a little, unsure. Thanks, I said. That's a relief. He continued with the session as if nothing strange had happened. He gave me simple advice, not a lecture. He asked me what foods I liked and didn't like. He said we could work with what I already enjoyed eating. I left the room with a short list, not a long plan. It included sleep tips, meal ideas, and a suggestion to drink water before my morning coffee. At the door, I said, Thank you. That was actually better than I expected. He gave a short smile and replied, I'm glad. And I hope the almonds helped a little while you waited. My eyes widened. So he had heard me. I opened my mouth to say something, but I didn't know what. He gave me a kind look and said, It's okay. We all complain sometimes. I smiled, and this time it was real. See you next week, I said. I'll try not to talk about you on the way here. Outside the wellness center, I stood still for a moment. The wind had picked up, and the sky looked brighter. I pulled out the small paper he gave me and looked at it. It wasn't a plan that promised big changes overnight, but it felt possible. I laughed to myself and said quietly, Maybe I judged too fast. Before I share the rest of my story, I need to know, where are you listening from? Knowing someone hears me, understands me, gives me strength. The next week passed faster than I expected. At first, I didn't think much about the appointment. I followed a few of Thomas's tips. I started eating something small in the morning, even if it was just toast and fruit. I didn't cut out coffee, but I drank more water, like he said. It wasn't magic, but it helped. I didn't feel as tired, and my stomach wasn't as tight all the time. But what stayed in my mind most was not the advice. It was the moment at the door when he smiled and said, We all complain sometimes. I thought about that more than I wanted to. I didn't know why it mattered, but it did. By the time my second appointment came around, I felt a little different. I wasn't excited, but I wasn't dreading it either. I dressed more carefully and arrived early. When I walked into the building, the receptionist looked up and gave me a small smile. She seemed to remember me. "Hi, Evelyn. You're a bit early, but that's fine. You can have a seat." I sat down in the same chair as last time. The music was the same soft piano sound. The posters hadn't moved, but I felt like something had changed. Maybe it was me. This time, when the door opened and Thomas stepped out, I didn't feel embarrassed. He called my name, and I stood with more confidence. We walked to his office again, and he asked how I'd been feeling. I told him I was still tired, but it was less heavy than before. I said the changes were small but helpful. He nodded and asked questions without pushing. He didn't act like I needed to be perfect. He listened. We talked more this time, not only about food, but about habits. He asked what I did after work, what time I went to bed, if I ever took breaks during the day. I told him I worked long hours and often brought my laptop to the couch at night. He said that was common. He didn't judge. Then he asked me something I didn't expect. "What do you enjoy doing when you're not working?" I paused. "I don't know," I said. "I used to read a lot, and I used to like painting, but now I don't really do much." "Why do you think that changed?" he asked. I looked down at my hands. I guess I got too busy, too tired. And honestly, it feels like there's never enough time. He didn't say anything right away. Then he said, "Rest is also part of health. Not just sleep, but joy, pleasure, small things that make us feel like ourselves again." That sentence stayed with me. He wrote down a few notes and then gave me a short list of food ideas again. He asked me to add something small to my routine, something that was just for me, something I used to love, even if only for 15 minutes. I nodded and stood up to leave. At the door, I turned to him. "You're not what I expected," I said quietly. He looked surprised. "What did you expect?" "I don't know," I said. "Someone stricter or colder, someone who would make me feel bad." He gave a soft laugh. "I think a lot of people expect that, but I've learned that most people already know what's missing. They just need someone to help them feel okay starting again." I left the office with something more than a list. I had this small feeling in my chest, like hope, but quieter. That evening, I didn't open my laptop. I made tea, sat on the floor with an old sketchbook, and drew shapes. Nothing amazing, just lines and color. I hadn't done that in years. It felt strange at first, but then it felt familiar. I smiled at the page like it was an old friend. Over the next few days, I added more things to my routine. I didn't change everything. I still got takeout sometimes. I still stayed up too late now and then. But I started taking short walks in the evening. I ate dinner at the table instead of in front of the TV. I even started making simple soups and buying fruit I actually liked. The third time I saw Thomas, I told him about the sketchbook. His eyes lit up. "That's exactly what I hoped for," he said. "It doesn't have to be big, just real." He was always calm when we spoke, but that time I noticed something else in his voice. A quiet joy, like he truly cared. Not just about the food or the plans, but about me. We kept our meetings short, around 40 minutes each. He never rushed me, but he didn't waste time either. Every time I left, I felt like I had learned something, not only about health, but about myself. I told Lila about him one night on the phone. "He's actually really kind," I said, "and I feel like I can talk to him without feeling stupid." "Sounds like you have a small crush," she joked. I laughed too loud, but my face got warm. "It's not like that. He's just respectful, gentle. Not many people are like that." "Well," she said, "just make sure it stays professional. But also, maybe notice if he smiles more when you talk." I told her to stop, but after that, I couldn't help but notice. At the next visit, I arrived early again. He stepped out of his office and gave me the same calm smile. But this time, something about it made my heart move. During our session, we talked about how my energy had changed. I said I was feeling better, not perfect, but more steady. He seemed pleased. Then he asked about the sketchbook again. "Still drawing?" he asked. "Almost every evening," I said. "It helps me quiet my mind. Like writing, but with color." "Would you ever want to show me something?" he asked. I blinked. "Maybe. I don't know. I haven't shown anyone in a long time." "No pressure," he said quickly. "I'm just always curious about people's art. It tells a story that words sometimes can't." I smiled. "That's true." The appointment ended like usual, but at the door, he paused. "Evelyn," he said, "I wanted to ask something, but only if you're comfortable." I waited. "I run a small evening group once a month. It's about food and creativity. People bring recipes, writing, anything they enjoy, and we share stories. Would you like to come sometime?" I felt something warm open in my chest. I didn't expect that. "I'd like that," I said. "Really?" He smiled again, this time softer. "Next one is in 2 weeks. I'll email you the details." I nodded and stepped out into the hallway. My mind was quiet, but in a good way. Outside the center, I walked to the bus stop again. I stood in the same spot I had on that first morning. I looked around, and the memory came back. My voice on the phone. My words full of judgment. I remembered how quickly I had formed opinions. How wrong I was. I thought about what Thomas had said. That people already know what's missing, and sometimes they just need help starting again. I took out my phone and opened a new note. "Things that help," I wrote at the top. The first line I typed was this: "Listen before you speak. The evening group was held in a small community room near the park. 2 weeks had passed since Thomas invited me, and during that time, I had gone back and forth in my head many times. I didn't know what to expect. I told myself it was just a group of strangers sharing ideas, but deep down, I knew it felt more personal than that. I chose to bring a small painting with me. It wasn't finished, but it felt honest. The lines were soft, the colors quiet. I had painted it late at night when I couldn't sleep. When I walked into the room, there were already a few people there. Some were talking in small groups. Others were setting food on a long table by the wall. The room smelled like herbs and fresh bread. There were no chairs in rows, just a few soft lights, cushions, and a circle of wooden chairs. Thomas saw me before I saw him. He came over and smiled. "Evelyn, I'm really glad you came." "I almost didn't," I said. But then I told myself I'd regret it if I didn't try. "That's usually true," he said. "We're just getting started. You can put your art on the table over there, if you want." I walked over and placed my painting next to a notebook and a small clay pot. The table held all kinds of things: drawings, printed recipes, poems, even a homemade candle. I felt less nervous seeing them. None of it was perfect, but it was all real. As we sat down, Thomas introduced the group. Some were new, like me. Others had come before. We went around the circle and shared our names and what we had brought. When it was my turn, I said, "My name is Evelyn. I brought a painting. It's not finished, but it felt right to bring it anyway." Thomas nodded. "Unfinished is still powerful," he said. People shared their stories as they spoke about their items. One woman had written a short story about her grandmother's soup. A man talked about how baking helped him focus when his thoughts were too loud. Another person said she just came to listen, and that was okay too. The room felt safe. No one was trying to impress anyone. We were all just showing small pieces of ourselves. After the circle, we moved to the table and shared the food. Someone had made rice with spices. Someone else brought fruit with honey. I took a little of everything and sat near the window. Thomas sat down next to me. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "I thought I'd be more nervous," I said. "But everyone is so open. It makes it easier." He nodded. "That's the goal. Health is not just what we eat. It's also who we spend time with, what we allow ourselves to enjoy." I looked at him carefully. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I do," he said. "It took me years to understand it, but yes." We ate in silence for a moment. Then he said something unexpected. "You've changed since we first met." I raised an eyebrow. "Already?" "Yes," he said. "You came in with your arms crossed. Now they're not." I laughed. "That's true. But I'm still stubborn." "That's okay," he said. "You're also honest. That helps." I looked out the window at the dark sky. The stars were starting to show. I realized I hadn't checked my phone once since I arrived. It felt good to be there. After the evening ended, I helped put away chairs and cups. As I reached for a bag on the floor, Thomas leaned in and said, "Thank you for bringing your painting. I hope you'll come again." "I think I will," I said. "It feels like a small breath of air." He smiled and said, "That's the best kind." That night, I walked home slowly. The air was cool, but not sharp. The streets were quiet. I thought about the other people in the group, how open they had been. It reminded me that everyone is carrying something. Some carry worry. Some carry sadness. Some carry hope, even if it's small. Over the next few weeks, I kept going to my appointments with Thomas. Our sessions became more than just health talks. We spoke about habits, yes, but also about life, about fear, change, and learning to be softer with ourselves. I brought in more drawings. I told him stories from my childhood. He listened with care. One day he said, "You don't talk about food as much anymore." I smiled. Maybe because I don't hate it anymore. That day, as I left the clinic, I saw someone standing near the bus stop. She looked tired, frustrated, phone in hand. I couldn't hear her words, but I knew the feeling. I remembered my own first visit, how closed I had been. How I thought I knew everything before giving anything a chance. That moment reminded me of something I had written weeks earlier. Listen before you speak. I went home that day and opened my notebook. I wrote a new line beneath it. Also, give people a chance. And later, when you find something good, let it grow. Months passed. My energy continued to improve, but that wasn't the most important thing. What changed most was my relationship with myself. I wasn't as hard. I allowed slow mornings. I forgave small mistakes. I said no when I needed rest. The art stayed. So did the walking, the warm meals, and the quiet group evenings. I didn't try to be perfect. I tried to be present. Thomas and I kept meeting, though the sessions became less frequent. Eventually, I no longer needed a plan. I had built something steady, not perfect, but real. On my last official visit, I gave him a finished painting. It was a quiet scene of a park bench under soft gray clouds. In the corner was a woman holding her phone and frowning at the sky. Across from her, a man with a book and dark shoes sat, calm and still. He looked at it and laughed. "I remember this moment." "I figured you would," I said. "May I keep it?" he asked. "Of course," I said. "It belongs here more than anywhere else." He walked me to the door one last time. "Take care of yourself, Evelyn," he said. "I will," I replied. "Thanks for not judging me that day. You could have said something, but you didn't." "I figured you'd learn faster if I didn't," he said. I laughed and stepped out into the sun. From that day on, every time I passed a bus stop, I remembered not just what I said, but what I learned, and how sometimes one quiet person with a kind voice and a listening heart can change everything. If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share. More simple and emotional stories are coming soon.